We're here today with Baha Hilo. He's from Bethlehem in Palestine. He's a sociologist and an activist from Palestine, and we're going to ask him some questions about what's happening, the genocide in Gaza. Thank you to be here, Baha, and I'll do some questions for you. Please, can you talk about the current situation in Gaza at the moment, and how are people dealing with the attacks and how they are defending themselves?
Thank you, Thanee. The current reality in Gaza is like for the 26th day today, people have been on the receiving end of like Israeli bombardment, where more than 14,000 tons of explosives were thrown at the residents and civilians that live in that tiny strip. Which is actually an equivalent of more than one nuclear bomb being thrown. The result of all the bombardment has been reaching up to like nearly 8,530 members of Palestinian families that have been murdered so far. About 3,600 of them are minors and children. We've lost more than 2,000 Palestinian females during those ongoing, as you said, during this ongoing genocide. There is no safe place whatsoever in Gaza. Gaza right now is cut off from the rest of the world, and the Israelis are like cornering the population there, denying them access to electricity, water, internet, denying them access to food, medicine, and things that you would need for your day-to-day life. So what the state of Israel has been doing in Gaza right now, like in the beginning, before October 7th, it was an open-air prison. Right now, what they are doing is like cutting off that prison from the rest of the world and murdering every single person they can get their hands on. Of course, we cannot tell anything about the actual losses that Palestinian families have been sustaining for the past 27 days, because the genocide is still going on. We need the genocide to come to an end so that we know exactly how many of us were murdered, how many homes were demolished, how many of us are removed, or the bodies that are currently under the rubble of the homes. We're talking about more than 2,000 Palestinians that remain under the rubble of their homes. With every moment passes, the hope that we'll be able to rescue individuals of them, like with every minute that passes, that hope dies away. The Israeli political and military leadership have been getting exactly what they wanted, or what they have been threatening Palestinians with for the past 70 plus years, which is a genocide, and now you have that genocide being televised, and you have that genocide being implemented right before your eyes with the support of superpowers like the United States, France, and the government of Great Britain, who may continue to supply the Israeli criminals with weapons and diplomatic and economic support.
Thank you. Thousands of people around the world are protesting in support of Palestine. Do you believe that this will pressure the international system to put an end to this genocide?
Protests around the world usually happen in support of Palestinians' quest to justice, self-determination, and freedom. And those things are not new. There is usually increase of those popular or public protests whenever the state of Israel increases its murderous and criminal activities towards the Palestinian people. The world has been witnessing like thousands upon thousands of people taking to the streets, trying to just show some kind of like solidarity with Palestinians who are being butchered and murdered. The impact of those protests, I don't see those protests like even creating any kind of pressure on the governments where those like protests are happening. There is a political decision made up by westernized governments to support Israel's genocide that is going on right now. So the protesters like have very limited, let's say, impact on their politicians. We need those protests to go on, but we need to relocate. The protests should be targeting the Israeli oppressor. We are not being murdered by your Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We are not being murdered by your parliament. We are not being murdered by your president. We are not being murdered by the supporters, beneficiaries, and defenders of the State of Israel in other countries. We are being murdered by the State of Israel. The State of Israel has an embassy in your country, and I have no idea why that embassy is still open after 27 days of genocide. So what we need is like relocate those protests from public spaces and open spaces and parliaments and so on to surround each and every Israeli embassy on the planet. And we need like sit-ins to happen in those places until Israeli genocide comes to an end, and maybe also until like Israeli apartheid comes to an end.
Thank you. We heard the news that today the border was open between Gaza and Egypt. Can you talk about it? If it's a good thing or is just a common procedure on the time of the events?
Listen, the State of Israel have been subjecting 2.3 million of us to bombardment. What we need is not opening borders. We do not need to improve our lives as the genocide is going on. You know, what needs to happen is that that genocide comes to an end in order to prepare, you know, for the legal repercussions that need to be taken over against every single Israeli criminal that has been participating in this ongoing genocide. So what I hear is that there is like some kind of humanitarian support to provide for the victims of Israeli genocide and for the Palestinian survivors in Gaza. And that kind of humanitarian aid is pretty sick because like one of the items that were provided for Palestinians is like cloths to wrap up their dead with, so coffins. So what is needed is not like opening the border for 2 hours in 27 days or waiting for the State of Israel to allow, you know, trucks of humanitarian aid to come in or come out. You know, what we need is a complete open of the border. We need supplies of people to come into Gaza to help people rebuild their lives. We need people to come into Gaza with like humanitarian aid. We need people to come into Gaza to help with the effort of rising out of the ashes that were caused by Israeli bombardment. So what do I think about? I think about it in this way. Like you and your family and your friends, let's say 200 of you are locked up in one room and then you are being bombarded out of existence, and somehow the doorkeeper can allow 2 of you to come out of that building or that prison. No, what needs to happen is not providing Palestinian survivors of Israeli genocide with 2 minutes of opening their border, or with 3 trucks of supplies. What needs to be done is that Israeli genocide has to stop right now, because every single minute that passes, we put the lives of Palestinian civilians under risk. And by the way, the Israeli butchers, the savages that are carrying out this genocide, are not going to stop, because they are not being held responsible. Right now, we have a world that it continues to provide support to a fascist that everybody knows is a racist scumbag. I'm sorry for my French, but everybody knows that he is a racist, genocidal figure, and the world is supporting that prime minister. So what needs to happen is not improving my life as I experience Israeli genocide. What needs to happen is that the state of Israel needs to be stopped, by the exact same superpowers that have been supplying it with diplomatic and economic and military support. So it doesn't matter. Like, the emergency that is being carried out right now or happening right now in Gaza does not need an open border only. Right now, Palestine is in that concentration camp. They are being under the rubble of their homes. So we need to start working in a situation where the lives of the Palestinians in Palestine, the lives of Palestinians in the concentration camp of Gaza, is protected from Israeli savages. That's what we need to see happening. It's not like opening the border for 3 seconds is not going to stop the genocide.
Thank you. Baha, leave a message to the Brazilian population about what's happening in Gaza.
What's happening in Gaza is genocide, genocide that is being televised before your eyes. I have no idea whatsoever why the Israeli ambassador is still operating in Brasilia. I have no idea why. I do understand, providing support for Israeli apartheid and oppression by a fascist like Bolsonaro. I do understand that, but I have no idea whatsoever why the government of Lula is still hosting war criminals in Brazil. My call on every single person in Brazil is who cares about, decency, who cares about justice, who cares about, the sanctity of life, not only in Brazil, but also in the rest of the world, that this genocide will go on, this apartheid will go on as long as there is an Israeli ambassador in Brasilia. The moment Brazil follows, and unfortunately, we're talking about, a country like Colombia, a country like Venezuela, Bolivia, who paved the way in America Latina to actually expel Israeli prime ministers. And I have no idea why Lula is not following. In fact, he was supposed to be leading that way of imposing, sanctions on this criminal regime. So the other thing I'm saying is that the Palestinian people will continue to be oppressed after expelling the Israeli ambassador from Brazil. But at least right now we are being butchered and murdered, in cooperation with the Brazilian government. So the Brazilian government is actually providing diplomatic, economic, and military support for my oppressor. So I do understand this from a fascist like Bolsonaro, but why is Lula behaving like a fascist too? I don't understand it. This is beyond me. So the message to Brazilian people, every single day, the representative of the state of Israel operates in Brazil. That is evidence of Brazilian support for the genocidal and barbaric and savage behavior of the state of Israel towards Palestinians. A few years ago, I worked a lot with people from Brazil who came to visit Palestine and understand what was happening here. My second day in Brazil was the time Lula was released from prison.
Oh.
I was there, and it is it's heartbreaking to see him behaving this way. Like he used Palestine. He used Palestine over and over and over again to get publicity and to get people who believe in justice to vote for him. And it's very disappointing, like to see his stance today. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
he should be a leader and an example in Latin America. He should not be. He should not be following the responsible, politics of other responsible nations.
Yeah.
You know, because like it
Definitely.
will, even if Brazil expels the the Israeli ambassador right now, Brazil will not be the first country in America Latina to do that. And Brazil is supposed to be the first country to lead, like struggle for like social equality and social justice in Latin America. Like he needs to be where he always like tried to be like a leader of like social justice. But now he's not a
Yes.
leader. He falls fifth. If he does it, he will become the fifth government in Latin America to expel the Israeli prime minister. And
Yes.
that's a little bit shameful. But once again, like better late than never.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I agree with you. And Baha, if you want to send news or anything to me, you can send me so you can talk to our newsroom and we can publish. If you want to send something, I'm open, so we can keep contact.
The
Yeah.
Yeah, like the information and the knowledge available. Like I do not know. I don't like. Are you like you know I'm a state struggle, right? Like like
Yes.
have you been like in any situation where an MST community started like with protests? Like you have activists come to the piece of land and then they claim it and they have to deal with the police and they have to deal with
Yes.
all that kind of crap in order to establish themselves. That 1 or 2 days of struggle is what has been going on in Gaza for at least 17 years, day in, day out, you know?
Yes.
And right now there is no power, no electricity. Like what is happening is like cutting hospitals off. Like besides bombing the hell out of hospitals, like the remaining like operating hospitals, like they ran out of fuel. Today, like the largest hospital in Gaza, Shifa Hospital, that has more than 45,000, you know, homeless people as well as sick people, like the regular patients. Like right now, that hospital ran out of fuel to keep like power going on. All kind of patients, like the only cancer treatment facility in Gaza. There are 10,000 Palestinians in Gaza who suffer from cancer. They have no, like they will be waiting for that tumor to kill them from within. So like in Gaza, you're caught between like being murdered by a bomb from without or being murdered by like something happening from by the sickness that is going on through your body. Like diabetics or people with kidneys failures. Like right now, like none of the dialysis machines work in Gaza. There are 57 of them that provide, care that is required for human survival to happen like 3 times to 4 times a week. So those machines are off right now, and everybody with kidneys failure can survive for 5 days, 6 days, and then they will die. So the problem is not only like we're dealing with health issues in a stable reality. We can calculate the people who are murdered by bombardment.
Yeah.
But right now you are thinking of also people who are being killed because of homelessness, killed because of avoidable diseases, killed because of lack of treatment, killed because of all other things that naturally kill you, unless you have like medical intervention. so it's like I do not know how to explain genocide. Like you say it, and that's what you see. The rest of the world is busy debating whether it's a genocide or not. But when the Israelis finish us, like people will, oh, I thought it was genocide.
Yes, it's, and I'm really sorry for everything that you're going through. I wish that we could do more.
Yeah, shut
We're
down the
doing,
embassy. That's
yeah.
it. That's it. Just like the only thing Brazilians can do for Palestine right now and in the future and later is to shut down and expel the Israeli ambassadors. That's the only thing that can actually bring us closer to peace and justice. The rest is like buying time for Israeli savages to continue to butcher us and maintain an apartheid, a highly complicated apartheid regime.
Yes, it's a really tough subject to talk. You being there next to it, and you're being a Palestine, I imagine the pain and the grief that you're going through on daily basis. And well, thank you again. Yes, please talk.
I want to say, like, in the occupied West Bank, it's a little bit different. In the occupied West Bank, the Israelis have separated 3.3 million of us into 230 separate geographic areas, like ghettos. And they could do that because they have the military checkpoints to install, themselves, to install Israeli army on the way in and out of every community. The main thing Israelis are doing in the occupied West Bank is like murdering Palestinians. Nearly with 4 Palestinians that were murdered last night, we're talking about nearly 334 Palestinians that have been murdered in the occupied West Bank by Israeli soldiers and Israeli settlers. We have more than 1,800 people that have been kidnapped from their families' homes, and thrown up into Israeli jails because the state of Israel knows that the main reason to carry out the attacks on October 7th is for prisoners swap. So they are loading up as many Palestinians as possible in Israeli prisons in order to use them as like bargaining chips in case like a prisoner swap process started. So what is happening throughout Palestine is like savage, and those savages are, the Israeli government, the Israeli army, the Israeli soldiers, like every warmonger that wants all of Palestinians dead. Those are the people in power, and like as long as our fate is in the hands of the savages, we are doomed to be murdered and eliminated. It's not like a Kafka kind of scenario. It's not an Orwellian kind of scenario. It's a real scenario that is happening. And once again, like you can see a genocide being televised before your eyes.
Yes, thank you, Baha, and we can keep
We'll
contact.
stay in contact, Thanee.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Sit down.